You didn't ask to be different. You didn't sign up to be misunderstood, stretched, or set apart. But deep down, you know, something about your life has never been ordinary. You've always carried a weight, a whisper, a fire you couldn't explain. This isn't coincidence. It's calling. These are the moments heaven marked you, not for comfort, but for something greater. And what you've been through is proof that you've been chosen. You've always felt it, that subtle tension between fitting in and standing out. You could fake the normal, blend in for a while, even convince yourself that the path of least resistance would be easier. But something in you just never sat right when you played small, when you tried to shrink, when you dimmed your light to make others comfortable, because you were never meant to be ordinary. God didn't create you to simply survive. He created you to shift atmospheres, break patterns, rebuild ruins, carry glory. And the reason it's been so heavy, so strange, so unlike everyone else's journey is because you've been chosen for something greater. And there are moments in your life, not random, not accidental, that prove it. Moments that didn't just shape you, but separated you. Moments that weren't just painful, they were prophetic. The first one, when everything familiar started breaking down, and you didn't understand why. You thought it was an attack. You thought you messed up. But God was dismantling your comfort zone because He was calling you out of it. You didn't know it yet, but the people who left, the doors that closed, the confusion that hit, it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. God was pulling you out of what felt safe so He could plant you in something that would make you strong. He wasn't being cruel. He was being intentional. Think about Abraham. Genesis 12:1. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. No details, no map, just the call. Leave. Why? Because God couldn't bless Abraham's potential while he was still surrounded by familiar patterns. And the same is true for you. You can't step into something greater while clinging to what's comfortable. And God knew that. So He broke it on purpose. You didn't lose that season. It released you. You didn't fail. You graduated. But it didn't feel like that, did it? It felt like isolation, like abandonment, like your life was unraveling. But in the kingdom, unraveling is usually reweaving. It's not destruction, it's design. You are being set apart. And chosen people don't always get explanations. They get assignments. And the assignment doesn't start when everything makes sense. It starts when you obey anyway. When you keep walking, even when the map disappears. When you pray when it feels like your voice is hitting a ceiling. When you choose faith while dragging disappointment behind you. That's when God says, "Now I can use you." Because chosen doesn't mean celebrated. It means trusted. And trust always begins in tension. The tension between what you see and what you know God said. The tension between what you lost and what you're about to carry. The tension between being pulled away from the crowd and led into the secret place. And that's the second moment you know you're chosen for something greater. When God starts speaking to you in ways no one else seems to understand. You'll bring your burden to people, and they'll say, "You're just overthinking." You'll try to explain the ache, the urgency, the tears that come without warning, and they'll look confused. That's because they weren't in the room when God whispered. They didn't feel what you felt at midnight. They didn't hear what He showed you in the silence. This isn't arrogance. It's assignment. God doesn't explain your calling to everyone. Sometimes He keeps it between you and Him, and that's what makes it sacred. You've been hearing things in prayer that don't make sense yet. You've been seeing signs in everyday moments. You've been waking up with names on your spirit, dreams that haunt you, scriptures that follow you. That's not imagination. That's invitation. He's calling you higher. Not because you're perfect, but because you're postured, because you're listening, because when others were distracted, you were available. And availability is more powerful than ability. But with divine whispers comes spiritual warfare, and that's where the third moment begins. And trust me, it's coming. You'll know you're chosen when the attacks get weirdly specific, when the enemy starts targeting your voice, your mind, your health, your peace, not because you're weak, but because you're a threat. You don't go after someone who's not carrying something, and you've been carrying fire, even if you didn't see it yet. But before we get there, you need to sit with this. You didn't imagine the shift. You didn't imagine the pull. You didn't imagine that still, small voice that's been calling you out from the middle of the noise. That was Him. That is Him. And He doesn't whisper into empty vessels. He whispers into willing ones. And if you've heard Him, even once, you're already marked, already sealed, already being drawn into something far greater than you imagined. But this next part, it's where the fire gets tested. The third moment is coming fast. And if you've been under pressure lately, under strange attacks, facing resistance that doesn't match your circumstances, you're going to feel this next part deep in your bones. You knew something changed when the attacks got personal. Not just random hardships, not just life being life, but targeted resistance that seemed to show up right when you started stepping forward. You finally committed. You finally said yes. You finally decided, I'm going to live this thing for real. And then, everything got hard. The moment you moved toward your calling, the warfare intensified. That's not coincidence. That's confirmation. This is the third moment you know you're chosen for something greater. When the battle becomes spiritual, but strangely specific, you start getting hit in places that used to be strong. Your joy, once effortless, now feels like a fight. Your sleep, once peaceful, is now restless. Your mind, once anchored, is now flooded with doubts and distractions. It feels irrational, but it's real. Because you're no longer just existing, you're advancing. You've become a target. Not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous. The enemy doesn't go after empty vessels. He attacks carriers of oil. Ephesians 6:12 says it best. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness. You're not being attacked because of where you are. You're being attacked because of where you're headed. The enemy sees the assignment on your life and hopes the pressure will make you question if it was ever real to begin with. He wants to convince you that the warfare means God left, but it doesn't. It means God trusted you enough to withstand it. Chosen people go through things that don't make sense, and yet they keep standing. You've noticed it, haven't you? The more you say yes to God, the more uncomfortable it gets. People misread you, friends grow distant, you walk into rooms and feel spiritually off. It's not in your head. You're just carrying something now that causes friction in atmospheres where compromise lives. You're a disruptor, and disruptors don't move through the world unnoticed. And maybe no one ever told you this part Maybe they only told you that being chosen means favor and blessing and doors flying open. But what they didn't tell you is that sometimes being chosen means feeling rejected by the very places you thought would embrace you. Sometimes it means being overlooked in rooms you prayed to enter. Sometimes it means God allows misunderstanding to protect your oil from being contaminated. You were never called to be popular. You were called to be pure. And purity requires pressure, because pressure reveals what's inside. It squeezes out the pride, the fear, the false motives, and it hurts. It stretches, but it also seals, and God is sealing something in you right now that can't be undone by the approval or disapproval of man. You're not crazy for feeling what you feel. You're not broken for wondering why everything got heavier after you said yes. You're just in the middle of the fire. But remember, fire doesn't destroy the chosen. It refines them. Ask Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They didn't just survive the fire. They walked out without the smell of smoke. Daniel 3:27. And so will you, because the same God who allowed the warfare is the same God standing in the furnace with you. You don't have to escape to prove you're chosen. Sometimes being chosen means learning to walk through it, to worship while the fire's still burning, to trust while the answers are still unclear, to obey while the tears are still falling. That's what sets you apart. That's what makes you chosen. And if you've been feeling tired lately, spiritually exhausted, emotionally spent, take a deep breath. That's not weakness. That's evidence. Evidence that you're pushing through resistance most people would have quit under. Evidence that God's stretching you not to break you, but to build capacity in you. Because what's coming next will require weight, and weight requires warfare. Not so you can boast in your strength, but so you can walk in authority. Authority doesn't come from titles or talent. It comes from scars, from choosing to stay when it would have been easier to run, from choosing to believe when it would have been safer to doubt, from being faithful with the one thing God gave you, even when it looked like it wasn't growing. That's what gives you oil, and oil is what the enemy fears. So yes, the battle has been personal, but it's also been prophetic, because the more intense the warfare, the more dangerous your yes must be. You said yes, and all of hell took notice, and heaven started moving, because one obedient life, fully surrendered, fully set apart, can shift generations. But here's what happens next. After the silence, after the whispers, after the warfare, comes a moment that will humble you to your knees. It won't look like what you expected, but when it comes, you'll know. Because God doesn't just confirm the chosen in secret. Eventually, He reveals them in power. There's a moment, and if it hasn't come yet, it's coming, where you open your mouth and something flows out that shocks even you. It's not rehearsed. It's not polished. It's not what you thought you'd say. It's deeper. It's fire. It's revelation. It's wisdom that didn't come from your education or your background or your experience. It came from oil. And that oil was crushed from all the pressing you didn't ask for. This is the fourth moment you know you're chosen for something greater. When God begins to speak through you in ways that even your past can't explain. You'll be mid-conversation and the Spirit will rise up. You'll be praying for someone and suddenly speak directly to the thing they never told you. You'll be sitting in stillness and verses will start forming into strategies. You're not just consuming the word anymore. The word is becoming flesh through you, because chosen people don't just carry messages, they become them. And that's when you realize all that silence, all that isolation, all that pressing wasn't pointless. It was preparing you to carry His voice, to be trusted with influence that can't be manipulated, to speak with authority, not opinion. Because God doesn't give His authority to the loudest, He gives it to the emptiest, to those who were broken enough to be filled, humbled enough to hear, quiet enough to be led. Jeremiah 1:9 says, "Then the Lord reached out His hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth." That's what's happening to you now. He's putting His words in your mouth, not to make you impressive, but to make you impactful. And people will begin to notice. They won't be able to explain it, but they'll know something shifted. You don't speak like you used to. You don't pray like you used to. You don't move like you used to. Why? Because the anointing changed your sound. You don't shout for attention. You whisper, and hell trembles. You don't have to be the loudest in the room, because you carry weight. Not ego, not ambition, glory. And glory doesn't need marketing. It announces itself. It lingers when you leave. It convicts without you saying a word. It shifts atmospheres, because it's not about you. It's about what you've become a vessel for. And that's why the enemy hates you. Not because of your past, but because of what you're now hosting. You've gone from begging for purpose to becoming the mouthpiece of heaven. You've stepped into territory where your voice is no longer just personal. It's prophetic. And prophetic voices are rarely popular, but they're always powerful. People may not like it. Some won't understand it. But even they won't be able to deny it. God is on you. There's a clarity, a cut, a conviction that can't be learned, only carried. And when you speak now, it's not to be heard. It's to deliver, to break chains, to ignite faith, to wake people up. And it's not because you're good at talking. It's because you've been with God in the crushing. This is why He took you the long way. This is why He stripped the pride. This is why He let the platforms delay and the applause disappear. He wasn't punishing you. He was protecting the purity of your voice, because if He had given it to you too soon, you would have spoken from your wound instead of your healing. But now you speak from fire. You're not just a messenger. You're a mirror. You reflect what others are afraid to see. You call people into alignment just by being aligned yourself. You don't chase opportunities. You walk in obedience, and doors open as a byproduct. Because when God puts His hand on your voice, you don't need to force influence. You just need to remain faithful. And if you've started noticing that people keep coming to you for insight, for clarity, for something they can't name, this is why. It's not you they're being drawn to. It's the presence you've made room for. It's the Spirit that now flows through your life like a river that can't be shut off. And no, you're not perfect, but you're yielded. And in the kingdom, that's what makes someone dangerous to the enemy. But here's the next part. As your voice grows, so does your burden, because the more God flows through you, the more you begin to feel what He feels. You begin to weep over what grieves His heart. You begin to carry people in your spirit like they're your own. This next moment, it doesn't come with applause. It comes with tears. But it's the clearest evidence yet that you've been chosen for something greater. There's a moment that no one claps for, a shift in your spirit that doesn't get celebrated on stages or posted on timelines. It's not loud, it's not glamorous, but it's the proof, the holy proof that you're not just being used, you're being trusted. And it's this: when you start feeling the weight of people you don't even know, and the tears come without your permission, you begin to carry burden, not because you sought it, but because heaven gave it to you. This is the fourth moment you know you've been chosen for something greater. It's when you start weeping over things you once ignored, when random faces pass through your mind during worship and you stop to intercede, when a passing story wrecks you for days, when you look at the world and feel the ache of heaven inside your bones. That's not emotionalism. That's what happens when the Holy Spirit gives you a piece of His heart. You're not just praying for your needs anymore. You're crying for nations, for prodigals, for revival in dry places. You wake up with names you haven't thought about in years. You feel a sudden stirring in the middle of your day, and you have to go to a quiet room just to pray. That's not random. That's not weird. That's intercession. That's what happens when you go from being used by God to being formed by Him. Ezekiel 22:30. I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap. You're that someone. You didn't apply for this. You didn't volunteer, but God saw your yes in the secret place, and He's now placing weight on your spirit. You're becoming a gap stander, a watchman, one who feels the burden so others can walk in freedom. And it's heavy, isn't it? Because no one sees what it costs you to carry. No one sees the late nights, the unexplained tears, the burden that won't let you go. You don't even always have words for it. You just feel. And sometimes you feel too much, and you ask God, why me? Why does this break me when others walk by like it's nothing? And He says, because I trusted you to feel it. This is what it means to walk with Jesus. He was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53:3. And when you walk closely with Him, you start to carry what breaks His heart. And yes, it's heavy, but it's also holy. It means you're no longer shallow, no longer safe. You're sensitive in the most powerful, Spirit-led way. And sensitivity is not weakness. It's your assignment. You feel tension in rooms other people think are normal. You feel conviction where others feel convenience. You sense when something's off before it's spoken. You cry when no one else understands why. You carry people in prayer they'll never know about. And still, you don't stop. You carry anyway. You go anyway. You obey anyway. That's what makes you chosen. Not the weight itself, but your willingness to hold it. And I know it's lonely. Not everyone understands this kind of burden. Not everyone hears what you hear or feels what you feel. But God never asked you to be understood. He asked you to be available. And you've said yes, again and again, even when it broke you, even when you had nothing left but tears. And heaven has seen every one of them. Psalm 56:8 says, you keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. Nothing has been wasted. Not one moment, not one night, not one groan too deep for words. They were seeds, and those seeds are about to bloom in ways you never imagined. Because this burden, it's not forever. It's an invitation to carry glory, to be entrusted with heaven's heartbeat, to partner with God in healing people who will never know your name. And one day, When they're standing in freedom, they'll never know it was your midnight intercession that broke the chains. But heaven will know, God will know, the angels who moved at your whisper will know. So don't let the heaviness make you withdraw. Let it make you press in deeper. Don't let the tears make you question your strength. Let them remind you that the Spirit is flowing freely through you. Don't let the silence convince you it's not working. You're shifting things in the spirit realm with every surrendered cry, because the final moment is coming, and it's not the moment the world sees. It's the moment you realize who you've become. The moment when the weight turns into fire, the tears turn into authority, and the wilderness turns into legacy. That's where we're going next. There comes a moment, and it's quieter than you expect, where you no longer question if you're chosen. You don't need confirmation from a pulpit or a prophetic word to settle your identity. You just know. You don't need applause to keep going. You don't need doors to open in order to stay obedient. You don't need people to understand the burden you carry, because the weight has become worship. The pain has become purpose. The wilderness has become the womb of something sacred. And this is the final moment, the moment you realize you've become the very thing you once prayed for. You've been through too much to stay silent. You've seen too much to go back. You've endured too much to live for anything smaller than the glory of God. And now you walk different, talk different, move different, not because you're better, but because you're burning. You've been marked, set apart, carved out, and no one can take that away from you. What you used to chase, you now carry. You're no longer driven by platforms. You're driven by presence. You're no longer praying for influence. You're praying for impact. And the people who overlooked you, the rooms that ignored you, the places that couldn't handle your oil, they weren't rejecting you. They were making room for who you're becoming. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be known to be dangerous, because the most dangerous believer is the one who has nothing left to prove and nothing left to protect. You've died to your image. You've surrendered your timeline. You've let go of needing recognition, and in return, God gave you fire. Real fire. The kind that changes people. The kind that walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere. The kind that says, "This one has been with Jesus." And now the enemy knows. He should have taken you out when he had the chance. Because you're not confused anymore. You're called. You're not waiting for permission anymore. You're walking in purpose. You're not asking, "Why me?" anymore. You're saying, "Send me." You've gone from questioning your worth to carrying heaven's weight. And this weight, this fire, this mantle, it's not a phase. It's not emotional hype. It's the evidence that you've been formed in the secret place. Not for a moment, but for a movement. And yes, you'll still face warfare. You'll still be misunderstood. You'll still have days when the tears return and the crushing feels fresh. But now you know what it's for. Now you know who you are. You've been chosen. Not for comfort, not for applause, but for something greater. And from this moment forward, you walk like it. You walk like you're carrying answers to someone's prayer. Because you are. You speak like heaven is backing your voice. Because it is. You pray like angels are waiting to move. Because they are. You show up like freedom follows you. Because it does. No more shrinking, no more silence, no more waiting for a perfect moment to live the message you already are. This is it. Your wilderness was not wasted. Your oil was not cheap. Your scars are not shameful. You've been branded by glory, And when heaven looks at you now, it sees someone who said yes and meant it. So rise, not with arrogance, but with authority. Not to perform, but to carry presence. Not to impress, but to intercede. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs those who've walked through the fire and came out holy. That's you now. A walking revival. A living altar, a temple that trembles with God's voice. You've been chosen for something greater. And from this day forward, you don't live like you're still waiting to be picked. You've already been marked. Heaven has already said, that one's mine. So go, stand tall, burn bright, speak boldly, weep freely, love wildly, worship deeply, and never forget what cost you everything is what made you unstoppable.